This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Duell. When we first started talking at Eastman about the concept of a podcast for Ed Reps, one of the names that came up immediately as a person we must interview was Steve Purcell. Steve is a legend amongst Ed Reps and recently retired after 40 years on the road servicing band and orchestra directors in the Indianapolis area for Paiges Music. We are talking with Steve today, and he pulls from his decades of experience to share some great wisdom and advice to current Ed Reps on how to build relationships, the importance of being involved with your teachers recruiting beginners, how he worked with teachers and students in step-up sales, and some advice he would have given himself 40 years ago when he first started on the road. I'm sure you will enjoy today's interview. Steve Purcell, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So you recently retired as an Ed Rep from Paiges Music in Indianapolis area, and I'd love to hear about your career as an Ed Rep, and I think everyone's going to learn so much from your experiences. And I'd like to learn a little bit about how long you were there at Paiges and how many customers you called on.
Okay. Well, I started out actually as a band director, and I was working with Paiges Music Store. And my representative from Paiges decided to go into fundraising. And so he recommended that I take the job. And fortunately for me, Paiges decided that was a good idea also. And that was in 1980.
Wow.
And I taught for 3 years, and I was in one of those jobs in a small school where you do it all. And if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. And so I would say to you that I viewed this as an opportunity to survive, because what I was doing, I could not see doing for, 45 years. So I joined Paiges in 1980, and at that time they divided up some of the accounts, and I ended up with about 3 to 3.5 days worth of schools, and I started out at about 800 rentals.
Okay. Is
the level I started at. And I know that for a lot of people around the country, that's probably a lot of rentals and maybe all they ever do. But I was in a wonderful place in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is a hotbed of music education and great band and orchestra programs. And so the growth has just been exponential over the 40 years that I served Paiges and all of the schools around Indianapolis. And so the very first day on the job, the manager of Paiges at that time, a gentleman by the name of Ike Eichmann, who I just loved and really helped me, threw me a map and a set of keys to an old van and said, "All right, go find some schools."
Here you go, figure it out.
Yeah, here you go, get going. And obviously it was a much different time, and Paiges is not like that now. There's a lot of training that goes on for new people. But, I went at it, and it was fun, and I just started calling on schools and introducing myself and asking if I could get their business. And I think to some extent, ignorance is bliss in that situation, because I had no fear of rejection or anybody telling me to get out, and I just went at it and started building the program.
That's fantastic. It's amazing. 40 years as an Ed Rep.
40 years, yeah.
The things you must have seen.
Long time in a van by yourself.
Yeah, no kidding. Right. If only you had a podcast to listen to all that time.
Right. That would have been great.
Oh, I'll bet you've seen just so much as an Ed Rep, and I can't wait to dig into your experiences. Before I forget to ask, what was your main instrument?
I was a trumpet player at Indiana State University. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm curious, with your experience over 40 years, you must have seen things change a little bit in the world of music education. And
yeah,
I'm really curious what you saw change the most, and where do you think it's going today?
Well, it's become a huge business now compared to what it was. I think when I started, even at the large schools, it was a much smaller thing. I mean, it was before there was really winter guard or drumline competitions. Marching band competitions were a few of them, mostly run by the Indiana State School Music Association, and there were not a lot of, BOA didn't really exist, certainly as it does now. And so the money wasn't spent, the time wasn't spent, the instructors weren't hired, mostly the directors wrote their own shows, wrote their own music, or bought canned music. And now, as I finished my career, I had several schools with a $500,000 a year marching band budget.
Wow.
And so that just is so different from where I started.
Right.
And that's not to mention all the other things that have changed in education, including access to schools. Back when I started, you could just walk in, all the buildings were open, and you didn't check in at a front office, and nobody thought of a security risk or anything like that.
Right.
And now it's difficult to get in the buildings, and I used to have a lot of people come ride with me, and they taught me a lot, and I was able to get them in to talk to directors. You couldn't do anything like that now because they would have to have background checks, and it would just be a nightmare to try to get people into the buildings. So,
right, and that's, of course, for unfortunate reasons of somewhat recent events over the last years, right?
Oh, gosh, yes. It's just been horrible that schools have become targets and all the things that have happened. But it's really changed the job because now you're in a situation where, everybody is on high alert, and it's changed the job.
Harder to get through. You have to get through a gatekeeper first, right?
That's correct. And I think when I started, again, I would just walk up and introduce myself and start calling on people. And now I can tell you from Paiges' standpoint, as we try to broaden our territory and the younger people go out, it's difficult just to get that first contact with the director because you make a phone call or send an email and you may not get a response if they're not necessarily interested in seeing you. And then how do you start? That's a real problem for people now.
Right. Used to just be able to walk into the band room, right? Now you have to go through a bit of a rigmarole to get
That's right.
face-to-face. What would you suggest to these younger reps who have started to experience some of these frustrations? I'm sure it's even more challenging now during COVID when parents aren't even allowed into the school sometimes. How would you make contact with a teacher you're trying to build a relationship with?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, I would work really hard in the summer. I wouldn't think of summers as time off. And I would be going to band camps. I would be pulling up at schools in the evenings when they have rehearsals and watching the rehearsal and then maybe introducing myself to the director when there's not a gatekeeper there. I think I would be working my networks, find out where the person went to school, see if you have some friends that are working with you that know them from school and could maybe make a phone call for you and get some reaction back from the person so that you're not just another salesperson making a call, because band directors are inundated with salespeople, especially fundraising people that want their time, and so they're not interested in another salesman taking up their time, generally speaking, if they're happy with where they are and their music store.
Good point. Yeah, band directors don't necessarily like salespeople, so that's an interesting question. How do you present yourself as more than just a salesperson to a teacher?
I never thought of myself as a salesperson, and I hope I never behaved as a salesperson in my 40 years. I was their partner in music education, and I tried to provide for them all of the things they needed to have a successful program, and I tried to provide things for them that would make their job easier, trying to make sending in repairs easy, trying to make purchasing easy, trying to get the best quality products and find out what everybody else is using in the area by bringing that to them. And so you become a person, I hope, who is a highlight of their week and somebody they look forward to seeing, and not another salesperson walking through the door. You don't want that.
So they saw you as a resource.
I hope so. I hope they saw me as a friend and a partner, mostly as a friend. But some of that I say because I was at it so long, and the size of the programs I served, there was a lot of stability in the directors, and so the relationships became closer and closer and deeper as the years rolled by. And so, then they're looking forward to your visit.
I'm sure they're missing you right now.
Well, I hope they are. I know I'm missing them.
Yeah. Throughout your years, what was your number one priority as an ed rep when it came to servicing your teachers?
Well, listening, I would say. So the way I would run my route coming in is I would try to take care of business first, and then have time to just be a person with them, and talk about our lives with each other, our families, our kids, their program, what's going on. But first, I would try to get the business out of the way. So my priority was always, because Paiges Music was paying me to be there, and I was driving their van and spending their gas, my priority was to take care of business for Paiges Music, but not sell them stuff, take care of business. And there's a difference there.
How so?
There are a lot of ins and outs on a weekly call to a school. You have a lot of things, if you're actually their person that they're using. In the case of Paiges, we would have loaners. They might have 10 or 15 of my loaners out there that I want to keep track of. There might be rental exchanges that took place the week before, maybe size up of instruments in the case of string instruments, or maybe a step up in the case of a band instrument, and you need to get your other one back. You can't let those things fall through the cracks, or you're not doing your job for the company. We hand out the monthly statements in person so that we can kind of go over it with the director and make sure there's not a problem, and of course bring their attention to it so that it doesn't become a problem. There are just all those kinds of things to do on a weekly basis, and so you need to make sure you take care of that first, and then you can do the other things that make the job really fun.
What was the fun part?
The fun part was just talking to people. I'm a gabber anyway. I think you have to be. You can't be a quiet introvert and do this job well, I don't think. I could be wrong on that. And so I just wanted to talk to my friends and find out whatever we talked about last week. Were they successful at their kids' baseball game, or at the date night with their wife, or at their contest with their band the weekend before? And just talk to my friends. And the other thing, at least at the schools I went to, there were often multiple band directors, and then you would have to go see the orchestra directors, and there could be multiple orchestra directors. And so to make your way around and visit all of the people that you needed to see, including, don't forget, the administrative assistant for the music program, you needed to have some time, and you needed to keep moving to get through and see everybody. Sure. So the fun part was catching up with everybody, but you needed to be efficient with your time so that you could move through the day. You know?
Right. It sounds like you built some really solid relationships with your teachers. Would you say so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes. I just, this week, I've played golf a couple of times with some teachers that I've had. I've had meals out with some retired teachers. I still vacation with my directors.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
So to someone who's starting the job, can you talk a little bit about the importance of building a really solid relationship with your teachers and what it does for you as a rep and for the business you're working for? Well, yeah, you can't do this job without solid relationships. And one of the things I would say to them, years ago at an ASMD meeting that I was privileged to go to, there was a gentleman by the name of Todd Duncan, and he spoke for a couple of days on a Roadman track. And one of the light bulb moments for me out of that was find people that want to work with you and focus your attention on them. And if people don't want to work with you, move on, because you want to be successful, and you're going to be much more successful going deeper in your relationship with people that want to work with you than you are beating your head against the wall of people who don't want to work with you. Great point.
And so, find those people that you connect with, that connect with you, who want your help, who are willing to invest in you like you're willing to invest in them, and partner up, and you'll have great success. So I would say look for those people if you're a young person coming out. The other thing I would say is get up out of bed early, go to work, expect to work long days, because that's how you're going to be successful in this business. I always called on somebody before school, all 40 years, because that's how you fit more people in. I always called on somebody after school. And then, of course, you have your rental nights to do. So there's some expectation of a level of work with this job, which not everybody's going to want to do, quite honestly. And there may be people that try this job and decide it's not for them. But I'll tell you, it's pretty rewarding to spend your life helping people make music. And I've started well over 100,000 people in music education. Wow. And that's a good way to have spent a life well lived, I think. I hope. I feel that way. Right.
That's a great way to think about it. I mean, just imagine where all of those 100,000 people are today, and maybe some of them are teachers Maybe some of them
I know they are
having their kids join band and orchestra. And you know they are, yeah.
That's right. And the other thing to be successful is you've got to have good listening skills because nobody wants you to walk into their building and start selling them stuff. You need to come in and you need to find out about their program and what they like about their current music store, if they're using another music store, if it's a new account that you're going after, and what don't they like about it, and what are their favorite instrument manufacturers, and make some lists of what it's going to take to satisfy this person, and make sure that you're the person that can do that, and that your store will be capable of doing the things that they're looking for before you waste your time and their time. So listen, you've got to have great listening skills and be writing them down and be adjusting what you're doing so that you're satisfying the people that you're visiting and calling on.
Great advice. You just mentioned writing it down, which brings to mind, how did you stay so organized with all of the teachers that you saw throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month? How did you get everything organized and recorded and all those orders done? Did you have a system?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. You have to have a system. A system starts with loading the truck in the morning. If you're not organized in your thought process about what you're putting in and where you're putting it and how you're going to access it throughout the day, and then as you pick things up where you're going to put them, you'll just get lost and swamped and you'll lose things in your truck. I don't know the kind of volume that everybody's doing out there, and obviously it's different at different places, but Paiges was in the neighborhood of 30,000 repairs a year.
Wow.
And there were 5 road guys for most of the time I was there. And so you don't really divide that up equally. Unfortunately, for some of the other guys that I worked with, I had most of the big accounts, and the reason for that was I was there first. Paiges was a much smaller store when I joined it, and there were 2 other road reps, and they eventually retired and we replaced them, but by that time I had gobbled up a lot of the Indianapolis area, and so the other guys were doing more rural areas. But the point of that story is that probably half of those repairs were coming in from my truck. So obviously in the end I was driving a large UPS type truck with shelves in it.
Wow.
And so everything is systematized. Early on, it was up to me and a briefcase and pads of paper. As Paiges has grown and computerized, and thank goodness for the management at Paiges, the way, in my mind anyway, the way the store developed, they decided to build it around music education instead of guitars and pianos and those kinds of things. And so once that decision was made, then it was built around the school road rep, and the store serves the road rep, and the road rep serves the school. And so systems were put in place at Paiges in terms of checking instruments in, managing instrument movement throughout the store, computer sheets that I had access to. When I left Paiges, it was still all paper. I had computer sheets every day to manage everything. I'm sure it's moving eventually to iPads so that the road reps will simply be checking everything in real time.
Sure.
But, then you can manage which repairs you took in last week, and did they all come back? If not, why? What's the problem? Is it waiting on a part? Is it waiting on a call back? You can manage all the other things we talked about earlier, the loaners and the instrument exchanges. But you have to have systems or you'll be swamped, and then your people will be angry and they won't want to do business with you. I had a funny story. I called on a guy for a lot of my career who moved up from Texas, and when he was down in Texas, he used to talk about, he would laugh. He had a roadman, just had a heart of gold. He had a pin on a rope around his neck, and his pockets were full of small pieces of paper. And he'd say, hey, do you have those reeds I ordered last week? And he'd go, oh, hey, and he'd start patting his pockets, and papers would fall out of his pockets and all over the office. And he'd be, oh, man, yeah, hey, let me get those to you next week. And so he was always amazed that he could order something from me and he would get it every time next week. And it's simply because if somebody started talking to me, even if I was on my way out the door, I knew enough to stop, open my briefcase, and write it down, not wait till I got to my truck because I might forget.
Right.
And so you just do simple things that make it possible for you to never fail somebody. And for me, that's write it down as soon as you're told about it. I always made sure I filled out a repair tag at the school. I'm not going to do it back at the store, because you get back to the store with 100 horns in your van, and you have no idea where that flute came from if it doesn't have a name tag on it of some sort. So then you're set up for failure.
Right. Sounds like a good way to lose instruments if you don't write it down right away.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, force yourself to be disciplined. You're responsible for the success of those programs. For each instrument is some child's and some parents'. And the last thing you want, especially in today's world with everybody complaining online about everything, is people getting online and saying, oh my gosh, don't do business with such and such music because they lost my instrument or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Word spreads fast these days on anything you do wrong.
Yes. There's no room for error. So don't allow yourself to make errors. And we're all human and we all make mistakes. That's one of the things I used to tell people when I was trying to get their business. Because I didn't want to set myself up for failure, I'd say up front, look, I'm going to make some mistakes and we're going to make some mistakes as a store. But what I can promise you is the way we handle those mistakes will make you and your parents very, very happy. And so if you get that out front and let people know that I'm not perfect, but I'm going to make it perfect in the end and you'll be happy, now you have a relationship that you can manage.
That's a good point. Sounds like you're good at also managing expectations.
Yeah. Well, let's not talk to my wife about that.
So I know something that a lot of ed reps do around the country is help teachers recruit the next batch of beginners. Is this something that you got involved with?
Yeah. Well, that is the golden nugget, right? So one of the ways I would say that is you work all year to please and with a servant's heart for everybody to get to that magical night where we all make a living at Paiges Music. And without that, there is no Paiges Music. So that was the driver for everything. And so, yes, I was involved in every aspect of that. And it evolved tremendously in the 40 years, as you can imagine. It went from myself and a band director spending 4 or 5 nights, one child at a time, that would show up, and they would mouthpiece test the child, select an instrument. The parent would come on into the next room or the hallway and talk to me one-on-one. And so I would do 70, 80, 90 nights a year of that kind of thing, which is just laborious and tedious and challenging, especially if you've already put in 12 hours on the road,
right?
To do that for 4 or 5 hours. And so slowly that evolved into what I always called meet and rushes, where we were able to move into mouthpiece testing and instrument selection for the children in the elementary schools or the intermediate schools, wherever the kids were, during the day. And so Paiges started hiring large numbers of retired teachers, sometimes 60 of them, I think, as many as that. And so they would go into the schools during the day, and then I would come in at night and do a mass parent meeting in a gymnasium or an auditorium for a couple hundred people. And so you could rent 100, 150, maybe even 200 instruments in a night, where it used to be one instrument at a time. And if I had to sit one more time and say, "Hi, my name's Steve. I'm from Paiges Music. What we do is talk to you about renting instruments." Wow, it's just a robot could do it. And so for me, it became a much more survivable, efficient way to do business, and that was because of access to the children in the elementary school, so we could get that mouthpiece testing, instrument selection out of the way ahead of time.
Did the teachers appreciate your involvement with the mouthpiece testing and the recruiting and helping them grow their beginner numbers?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they get hooked on it to the point where they would never consider leaving your company. I think it's a wonderful service that you provide for them. It again, what we talked about earlier, lightening their load. What can you do to ease their burden? Well, if you're a middle school band director, one of your biggest burdens is recruitment every year. And so if you can start taking some of that off of them, Paiges will mail letters for them. We'll produce the letters for them if they want. We pay, for the mailing. We'll do anything that they need. We pretty much take care of it. I would take sets of instruments. If they have 10 elementary schools, I'd take a set of instruments to each elementary school 2 months ahead and leave it with the general music teacher so that they could do an introduction to the instruments with real instruments and demo them for the kids. And, that's expensive.
Sure.
Every time you flip those sets, they need to go back through the shop and make sure they're working and sterilized. And all of that costs Paiges money. So, but if you can go from 100 beginners to 250 beginners, then Paiges Music is willing to spend a little bit of money to get that kind of revenue stream.
Sure. So your time can really pay off if you see those numbers increase.
And then the other thing, being an ed rep, you have access to, I had about 75 stops a week that I was making at when I was working 5 days a week in my heyday. And so if you're talking to all those directors, you share best practices from one director to the next. Mm-hmm. And again, I think the internet has made some of that easier. I worked long before the internet was coming along, so you were the source coming into the school and bringing that information, but still, there's nothing like person to person. This is really working for Joe down the street, and I think this would work for you, and here's how you implement it. So, Paiges just did a wonderful job of helping people. And it wasn't just me. I mean, don't begin to think that I was some miracle worker. There's a whole staff at Paiges. We have a group called school specialists that the directors can call in, director services. They can access our best and brightest. There's a manager there called Tim Dawson, who manages the outside roads staff as well as director services, and also a division called Chops Percussion. But Tim is a lifeline for directors because he's always available for them and will help anybody. And again, I was one of 5 road people, so there were 300 accounts that needed to be helped, and so Tim would help anybody from any of those accounts. So you have backup people helping you manage all of that and keep in touch with everybody.
That's great. They must have really helped you stay organized on the road, keep things flowing, the product ready to go when you get back to the store, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. One of the things that was eye-opening for me the first time I went to NASMD was the variety of styles for a road person around the country.
So true.
I don't think I realized. So, for example, I never would come home until everything was taken care of. So if I was never more than 30 to 40 miles away from my home, and yet I was able to serve all of these gigantic, enormous, wonderful schools. But I know there are people in Montana that do a 1-week loop.
Yeah, there's so many different styles of being an ed rep in different markets. And I was an ed rep in Utah where the dots on the map were super far apart. I'd drive up to 5 hours away from the store to go find rentals.
Yeah. Well, the joke at the store always was I drove 10 miles and rented 100 horns, and everybody else drove 100 miles and rented 10 horns.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens when you get outside of the metropolitan areas. You have to drive much further, and it has to be a lot more worth it, right?
Right. And then that starts to be the trade-off, yeah. That's a challenge for a store. In my situation, I can tell you in my leaving that there are 4 guys doing what I used to do, and by that I mean they moved all the accounts around so that more of the large accounts could be spread out and they weren't all with one person, and that is probably more fair, but I sure enjoyed doing all the big accounts. It's kind of nice to have that luxury.
I would imagine too with the big accounts, those teachers stuck around for a while and you got to know them for a long time, became pretty good friends.
Yeah, one of my old road guy buddies always used to say he trained them for me. They would come to him, be there for a year or two, and then move up to the bigger schools, and that way they already knew how to do business with Paiges when they got there.
I see. Yeah.
He was right.
That's great. So another category, speaking of ed reps doing different things across the country in different styles of working with teachers, one thing you hear about people doing very differently is step-ups and working with teachers with step-ups. Yeah, some people do it in the store, some people do it in the schools. Without divulging any Paiges music secrets, what kind of work would you do out in the schools with the teachers and get them motivated to get their kids into a better instrument?
So step-ups are something that really evolved over 40 years, I can tell you that. And we did just about everything you can imagine in my time there. When I first started at Paiges, Honestly, I did not deal with a lot of step-ups. And then we started to develop an in-school program for a while that we did, and it had varying degrees of success. And then we went to super sales, where once or twice a year we would partner with the manufacturers and bring in lots and lots of instruments and have a long weekend where we would all work in the store. And the problem with that is you just have such a small number of kids actually come in and take advantage of it. At least that was our experience. I'm not saying they weren't successful, but what has been wildly successful for Paiges in partnership with the manufacturers has been the new way to go about it, at least for Paiges, which is back to the school setting, where we take sets of instruments out. I talked earlier about taking try-on instruments out to the schools for general music teachers. Well, now we take entire sets of step-up instruments out to the junior highs. It's mostly a junior high program. And after 18 months to 2 years, try to get an upgraded instrument, either an intermediate or a professional, depending on what the teacher wants, into the hands of the child, let them play them for a couple of weeks, pass them down the line. And of course, that's going to be challenged with COVID now. So
Sure.
Now that I'm retired, I'm not sure what they're going to do about that in the future, but I'm sure they'll figure it out. They're smart. And that has been wildly successful, because then you really generate interest with the child. They can hear the difference, and they will go home and say to mom and dad, I want to upgrade my instrument because I really like music and I want to stick with it. And so that's all done in partnership with the director. They, again, select the makes and models of instruments. They have a letter that they send out to the parents, letting them know what's going on. We have a letter we send out with our current rental customers, letting them know what's going on and what their rent credit transfer would be if they were to make a step up. And that has been a very, very successful program for Paiges and our partners in instrument manufacturing. And so it's really turned a corner and has become a big part of the business now. Yeah, but it's just fine-tuning it all the time. And again, finding people that you want to partner with. I will say we started out trying it at a few schools and then expanded it. And then Mark Goff really gave the input that schools that didn't have a lot of success maybe weren't as interested in doing it as those that had a lot of success, and that maybe we'd be better off focusing on the people that want to partner with us.
Sure.
And so it went from really trying to get in and do every school to let's focus on the schools that really want to do it. And that's where you find success, is finding a partner.
I'm curious, what did you find was the difference between the teachers who were partners with you, who were really excited about this idea, and the teachers who just weren't really into it? What was the big difference, do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things. It's more work for the teachers, and not everybody is interested in more work. I would say that I served some of the finest music educators in the world, just very impressive people that work so hard and do so much for kids. But not everybody is interested in staying after school to do another night of rental. They already put in a lot of hours.
Sure.
I would say that some people have the feeling that they're asking their parents to spend more money, and they don't feel comfortable being in that situation. It was enough that they went ahead and rented an instrument to start with, and they don't feel they should say, now, if you really want to be good, you should get this instrument.
You should spend more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so not every director, because of that crossing of the line of you're my partner, but now you're really helping to sell the instrument for Paiges Music, that makes some people uncomfortable, and that's fine. Everybody's different, and everybody needs to be treated differently, and so it's just a matter of finding those people that are comfortable with it.
Sure.
And so for a variety of reasons, not everybody has been completely on board with that program.
Yeah. For those teachers who are a little hesitant about talking to the parents and even talking to the kids about getting a better instrument, were there a few things that you would teach the teacher about step-ups, or some tips or ideas on getting them to come to the other side, those who are a little hesitant, and bring them over to being on board with this idea? Was there anything
Absolutely.
that you talked to them about?
Sure. When you start talking about your kids are less likely to quit if they recommit to a new instrument. It re-energizes the child's practice habits. It makes the intonation of the band better if they're on better quality instruments. All of those kinds of things we would talk about, and some people would nod their heads and say, you're right, I hadn't thought about it that way. But there's still always going to be a handful that are just, well, I just don't want to do it, But yes, we would educate them and try to show them the benefits of doing it. And it's not that the kids have to do it. I'll tell you, even it's one of the most successful schools, and we would rent a lot of instruments there, and the director's completely on board, feeding into one of the finest music programs in the country. They got a few phone calls from parents who didn't appreciate the fact that their child came home. I think what it really boiled down to is they didn't want to be parents and tell their child no. So they felt like if their child came home and said, I want an F attachment trombone, they had to buy it for them. And so they would email the director and say, I don't appreciate your pushing this on my child. I'm going to go ahead and get it, but I just want you to know my dissatisfaction. So you know how it is in today's world.
Sure.
Everybody can quickly access you and express their opinion, and we find it hard to agree on things. But for the most part, it's been a wonderful program for the music programs, and it's been great for Paiges Music and our manufacturing partners. So it's worth keeping. You just have to go through the bumps,
Yeah. It sounds like if someone's not doing that, it's worth the initial struggle of getting teachers on board with this idea. But in the long run, It sounds like really everybody wins. The teachers have a better sounding band. The students are more motivated. The store has a healthier income, obviously, if you're selling more instruments.
Yep. And the road guy makes a little more money.
There you go. That's always good.
Yeah. And as much as I loved it, and I'm proud to have served music education, never be confused about the fact that we all have to make money, or else we can't stay in business. And so it has to be profitable, that's for sure.
So true. So it sounds like you worked with band and orchestra teachers. And you're a trumpet player, as am I. And, like so many ed reps out there, they come from a band background and they have to work with orchestra teachers, even though they didn't necessarily play an orchestra instrument or grow up in any sort of orchestra setting. How would you work with orchestra teachers that was successful, that you might give some advice to other ed reps out there who aren't as comfortable working with orchestra teachers?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, in the end, an instrument is an instrument and a child is a child. And a lot of times, as a road rep, when you have band and orchestra programs together, you get put in the middle almost of a recruiting war. And so I think you need to be neutral about that and let everybody know that you just want the kids to be in music, have a great experience, and obviously, hopefully get their instrument from you. But I would listen to the string teachers instead of talking. I would go back and talk to my repair shop about things I didn't understand. We certainly did training at Paiges about instruments. When Eastman came on board, we really upgraded our string program. Eastman was that first company, as you know, that really brought a high-quality, low-cost string instrument to the schools. And we went from the plywood cellos and basses to carved cellos and basses and a much better-sounding student instrument. And the other thing Paiges has done is we have a string shop called Encore Strings. And so we have really wonderful experts within the store that you can direct questions to if there's something you're not sure about. And again, if you don't have that at your store, then you need somebody you can turn to, hopefully a repairman or a friend in the industry that you can get back to people with questions and concerns that they have. But Paiges worked really hard at offering a high-quality string instrument. And so that immediately wins the directors over. I could go on about some of the things they do. For example, strings are covered with a Paiges rental. And that may sound unusual to some people. Maybe other people are doing it. I don't know. But when you're doing those kinds of things, it sets you apart from other companies. And so I would leave a set of strings, for example, with the directors at the schools. And if they broke a string during the week, they could immediately get a kid up and running again by putting a string on, and then they just simply call in the child's name, we'd run it through the computer, and send a replacement string out the next week. So we were fronting all of that, and you make friends really fast when you treat people that way and treat customers that way.
Sure.
my knowledge base on strings I would not say is deep, but I've had a number of courses, day-long courses, a lot of them from Eastman, on what makes a good string instrument, what to look for, how they sound, that kind of thing, how to size them properly. So you can become proficient. You can educate yourself. You don't have to be a stupid trumpet player your whole life.
Well, it sounds like you were plenty successful with the orchestra teachers. Even though you're a trumpet player, it sounds like you had good instruments, you had expertise back at the store, and you were just a good rep to those teachers, and they supported you.
I tried to be. I mean, they're all equal to me. Everybody's the same, right? Yeah.
That's great.
I will say, for those people that don't have string accounts and are going to be getting string accounts, there's a little more work involved because of the size exchange. With a band instrument, you rent them an instrument and then you maintain that instrument. But with a string instrument, if they start out on a half size, move to a 3/4, and then eventually go to a full, and it's not just a full, it's do you want, what level full-size instrument do you want? So there is a little more selling, a little more time involved with string instruments, but it's very, very worthwhile to make sure you're including that. Yeah.
Would you take care of a lot of those logistics of exchanging the sizes and things like that? Would you do that on the road, or would you try to get them to come into the store?
Well, when it came time for a full size, I would encourage them to come into the store because I would talk to them about the fact that it's no longer necessarily an outfit purchase. You may be buying a case, a bow, and an instrument separately, and you may want to do some selecting on that. And of course, string teachers understand that and get it. We also do step-up string displays out at the schools, just like we do step-up band displays. And so that's an opportunity for people to try some instruments at the school. But the small size, the directors could simply call the names of the kids in, or the parents, but a lot of directors did it themselves when they saw that a child was ready to move up. And then that was done for me at the store, put on my shelf, and then I was responsible for taking it out and getting the small size instrument back. So I did the exchange, but the work was done at the store of selecting it, putting a name tag on it, and making the change in the computer.
Okay.
That was done for me. And again, that helps me be a good salesman, because I'm not doing those things. We have people doing those things.
Right. And probably string experts back at the store.
Right, that's correct. Making sure they're set up the way the director likes it. That's right.
Yeah, that's great. Good tip for those of you who don't necessarily have that support back at the store. I remember the same thing when I was a rep. It was so invaluable to have someone back at the store who knew strings, who I could turn to, who a guy could rely on, and I knew what they handed me to give to the customer was top notch.
Yep.
So after your 40 years of experience, if you were to go back to your early days as an ed rep, knowing all the things you know now, what advice would you give yourself to do the job better, maybe a little sooner, some things you learned?
I think that when I first started, I was really in the sales mode because I wanted to be successful. I wanted to impress the people that had hired me. And I think I was a little pushier maybe than I needed to be. I think I learned to back off and earn the business through opportunities and through service. I think I would also learn to ask for help sooner. I think I tried to do so much myself that I just worked myself into a hole. I was working 80, 90, 100 hours a week during display season. And it was just insane. 4 hours of sleep a night. Well, first of all, some of that's my own fault because the way we did business back then, you did the road job, you did the night job, and then we immediately took the directors out to dinner. Wow. And so, you're getting home at midnight, and you're getting back up at 4:30 in the morning. And so one of the things that changed to make that possible was we moved the dinners to summers, to other opportunities to thank people for their business and took some of those hours off. But also, I just needed help. I couldn't do it all myself. And so when I finally manned up and admitted that, and I would say I was about 50 years old at that time, Mark Goff immediately said, I wondered when you were going to ask for this, and I'm kind of surprised it took this long. So don't be afraid to ask for help. We all need help, and as the job grows, as you grow the job, and make it more successful, you may not be able to do it all yourself. And so look for resources from within your organization to help you be successful. Don't try to be the lone wolf. There's a lot of that, I think, in being a road person.
Sure. With that many hours and that much work, I'm sure there was a moment, more than once maybe, where you felt probably a little burned out, right?
Yeah. So that's a funny story too. You have to be careful what you say on the road. First of all, you have all this confidence that is being given to you from people. They're giving it to you in confidence. That's what I should be saying. And you need to be careful not to spread that around on the road. But also, at about 7 years in, I would say, I was overwhelmed with this job that was growing exponentially, and I started sort of saying to some of my directors, well, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this. I may look around. And one day I walked into Paiges Music, and the manager called me into his office and said, hey, Steve, have a seat. And I sat down and closed the door. He said, I hear you're leaving us. And of course, immediately you start sweating from all of your tight places. And I said, I am? Yeah, that's what I hear. I hear that's what you've been saying on the road. So, so your job as a road guy is not to bring your problems to them. So you don't walk in and complain about your job or your company or things going on in your lives. Nobody wants to see somebody that is that person.
Sure.
So it's a little bit of an acting job, I guess it's fair to say, although you don't want to be, there's no pretending in it, but just leave that in the car and go in and put on a show. Be that person that they want you to be, and then go back to your car and deal with your own problems. But you don't take that stuff in. And so anyway, I had that little experience in my life, learned to keep my mouth shut about my own dissatisfaction. And I'm not saying you don't share if, you have an illness in the family or not those kinds of personal things, but I'm talking about dissatisfaction, certainly with your company or your job or anything like that. Yeah, you want to be real careful of that because they're choosing to use your company, they're recommending your company, and they need to feel confident in your company and that you're confident in your company too.
Sure, and if you're complaining about it, that erodes all that confidence, right?
You are just sticking a knife in your own heart. Absolutely. Yeah.
Good advice. So Steve, after 40 years, what kept you motivated that whole time?
That's a good question. So for a long time it was numbers. I just wanted to see how big I could grow it. And that was motivation because it was a game. But eventually I realized that I had grown as much as I could. I actually started shedding accounts as some schools would grow. You'd start out with one junior high and one high school, and the next thing you knew in that district, you might have 4 junior highs and 2 high schools. And all those additional stops meant you had to get rid of some other schools so that you could make the schedule work. So I realized that wasn't going to be enough to keep my head in it, so I decided to go for excellence. My plan every day was to see if I could do it with excellence. Could I not come back to the store and have a problem that I missed in my van or that was missed with paperwork? Just anything to engage your brain. And of course, at that point also, these were my people. I mean, they're everything. I mean, they're the people whose weddings I go to, whose parents' funerals I go to. They are your life. It's not just your job. The people that came over to my house on the weekends for dinner and cookouts were my band directors and orchestra directors. And so then you want to do it because you want to stay connected to all those people and make those people happy and make those people successful. So I think you'd have to keep finding motivation as you go through a 40-year career. And I was successful in doing that, although I will say to you, it was probably time for me to retire. It's a hard job, let's just say it. And for people that are doing it, congratulations. You're doing great work, but you've got to stay physically fit to be able to do this job long term. And as you get older, climbing in and out of a van, walking up and down hallways, it's hard, the weather. So, when it's time, I think, to move on. And that's kind of where it came to for me. It's a hard job. And Paiges, trust me, they were so kind to me. I went to 4 days a week, probably 6 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I went to 3 days a week.
Okay.
And Not a lot of stores would probably allow that, but I worked with great people who helped me succeed, but also helped me succeed longer than probably a lot of places would have kept you around as an old person doing a job like this. So very thankful for working for such good people.
Indeed, they are great people over there at Paiges
Yep.
Music.
Yep.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate you opening up and sharing your career with us. And what an experience you have over 40 years of working with teachers. And hopefully this isn't our last conversation. I'd love to talk to you again in the future on another episode and go into some other stories and experiences you had, if you'd be game for it.
Absolutely. This was fun. I appreciate it. It's nice to know I'm not completely forgotten out here in the world of COVID.
No way. In fact, Steve, I want you to know this. When we at Eastman were talking about this idea of a podcast, your name was one of the very first ones that were brought up that, we need to talk to Steve Purcell.
Oh, that's nice to hear. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for your time today.
All right, Shane, you take care, and good luck looking through the windshield out there, boys and girls.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe. We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an Ed Rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.